and welcome to our weekly podcast, Deeper Than Death. I'm your moderator, Joseph. Today we will be discussing the tragic event that recently occurred, the death of our beloved noblewoman, Desdemona. To our surprise, she was strangled by her own husband and our general, Othello, who has been manipulated by our lieutenant, Iago. Desdemona's death has a deeper meaning and bears social, psychological, and criminal implications of our values and issues as a Venetian society. To understand Desdemona's death, we need a deeper understanding of the mental state of her murderer. We will interview Sachi, our psychology expert, first to see the psychological motivation for Desdemona's murder at the hands of Othello. Hi Sachi, could you tell us about Othello's mindset?
Hi Joseph, thanks for calling me in. From a psychological point of view, Othello's insecurities pushed him to murder Desdemona. Although he was a respected general here in Venice, Othello understood that he was inferior to the white majority because he was black in our prejudiced society. This reflected poorly on Othello's own self-image. When he learned that Desdemona appreciated him for who he was, regardless of his race, he based his self-worth on Desdemona's love to mitigate his own racial insecurities.
I understand, but if Othello loves Desdemona so much, then why does he easily become so jealous?
That's a great question. Othello easily became jealous when Iago told him that Desdemona was having an affair because Othello did not trust her. He was ready to believe the worst because he was still unconfident that Desdemona actually loved him, especially since we Venetians considered interracial marriage a taboo. Othello was thus consumed by jealousy, so he clinged onto Desdemona's love with a great passion because letting it go meant damaging his own self-worth. As author Pam McAlpin says, jealousy can be viewed as an indication of the value that the jealous person places on a relationship. Therefore, Othello viewed adultery as the greatest sin because if he couldn't have Desdemona's love for himself in order to establish his own confidence, then no one else could either. Othello's double insecurities of his race and Desdemona's love made him spiral into madness that prompted him to kill her.
That is an interesting perspective of Othello's general psyche, Sachi. But how does that relate to the racial and domestic issues of our society on a broader level? Let's talk to Aime, our sociology expert. Hi Aime, could you elaborate on these issues?
Hi Joseph, it would be my pleasure. From a race standpoint, Desdemona's murder shows how Black people are more likely to take part in domestic violence because of the moral structure and preconceived social constructions of our society. Our Venetian community constantly belittled him because we saw him as an alien due to his race. Othello was under great social pressure from the stereotypes and cultural discrepancies that arose from his skin color, which changed his morals, behavior, and gave rise to the insecurities that Sachi noticed. These insecurities and opinions betrayed Othello's reaction to personal attacks, turning his sense of not belonging into violence and eventual murder. I attribute this death mainly to the theory of social disorganization. According to a group of sociologists from the University of Chicago, this theory states that the location of a crime does matter because of the consequences ecological and social factors of the society have on the criminal. Given this, we can see that the role social pressure and constructions had in Othello's attitude and values was so impactful that it channeled his feelings of anger and being wronged into a crime.
Desdemona's murder definitely has strong relations to the racial stereotypes of our society. But what does it say about our gender roles?
Thank you for that question, Joseph. I think it says a lot about our gender roles. Gender plays a crucial role when examining Desdemona's murder because we can see how women's lack of empowerment and involvement in toxic relationships within our patriarchal society caused Desdemona to find herself in that situation. As Martha Wrong points out, Desdemona's definition of self is not dependent on father or husband, but a mother, maid, and attendant, a world evoked by Shakespeare's plays when women define themselves in contradiction to masculine authority. With this in mind, we can see how Desdemona's social background led her to get involved in a toxic relationship where she wasn't trusted and had to take a subordinate position in that relationship. This expression of male supremacy shows how Desdemona was never valued for who she is and what she represents, and how society instilled that in her, leaving no room for development.
Thank you for your input, Aime. I'm going to have to agree with you there. Desdemona was definitely never valued for who she was as a person. I think it's also important to show how Desdemona was actually killed. Not only did Othello resort to wanton violence and succumb to the pressure and his belief in his wife's infidelity, But his mode of murdering his wife is also significant. Strangulation suggests a great passion at the thought of his wife's infidelity, as well as his barbarous nature, since it requires a great amount of energy and power than, say, a sword. Now we will turn to Abraham, our oratory expert, who has analyzed Othello's way of speaking.
Thanks for having me, Joseph. Something that I want to look at is how Othello presents himself before committing the crime. Othello always sounded confident of himself, showing self-assurance. However, this assertion covers his flaws as a person. As Sachi and Aimee talked about, fear and jealousy fill Othello's person. In his aggressive state, he asserts dominance, particularly when he decides to hit Desdemona. Even after he assaults her, Desdemona still listens to Othello when he calls her back. In this scene, Othello's way of speaking further connects to gender roles Aimee talked about earlier. Overall, Othello's self-presentation and speech relate to the murder of Desdemona. Marcia Macaulay speaks about this idea and how the whole story is voiced. However, we should not just focus on Othello, but also on Iago, who acted as Othello's manipulator.
I find it interesting how you take blame away from Othello. You say that Iago was a large player in the crime. Tell us more.
When we look at Iago, there is a pattern in how he talks to Othello. Despite his words pointing at the fact that he means no harm, Othello consistently wants to know everything. A key example of this is when Iago asks about the wooing of Desdemona. Instead of leaving it at that, he follows the statement with no further harm. This is like when you are trying to figure out something, but you are also trying to hide it from the person. In addition to that, Iago uses imagery, sarcasm, and rhetorical questions to trigger what Othello is most insecure about. Particularly, questions are key to manipulations since they contribute to rethinking and further examination. Being so close to Othello, he knew what he could take advantage of and thus manipulated Othello to get his desired outcome.
Thank you for your insight, Abraham, and thank you to our other guests today, Aimee and Sachi. I think we had a very thoughtful discussion about how Desdemona's murder has serious connections to the psychological, social, and criminal aspects of our society. The fact that crimes continue to occur in Venice shows that our society has many issues that are in dire need of resolution. But through discussions like these, we can bring more awareness to the problems that our society faces. I'm eager to dig deeper as we continue our discussion next week on Deeper Than Death. Thank you for tuning in.